welcome to this MySQL tutorial series. In this course, we will be learning every subject that we need to manage MySQL database and servers. Whether you're absolutely new to MySQL and databases or you have a background about them, this course will walk you through all the subjects that you need to confidently control and manage MySQL servers and application databases. As you may already know, MySQL is one of the most powerful database management systems that has been used way more than its other competitors. MySQL is a free and open source relational database. In relational databases like MySQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL, and so on, different information are stored in a database in a categorized way and related to each other. Of course, there are other types of databases like MongoDB, InfluxDB, and so on that work with different terms. But in most cases, relational databases are the best choice when we want to deal with the data in a structured and classified manner. In this course, I will be describing everything from scratch. First of all, we will install and secure the MySQL server on our operating system or online server, depending on your choice, and then we will be going on with the journey and learning how to secure, monitor, control, execute different types of commands, and work with the server the way that we get whatever we want from the MySQL server. Of course, there are tools like Workbench, PHPMyAdmin, etc. that can help us perform some of the actions using graphical user interface and make the work a little bit easier in some cases. But in this course, we want to leave all those tools aside and deal with the MySQL server using the SQL language and the MySQL command line interface head-on. This way, I will be sure that you can get whatever you want from the server in the future, no matter what the situation is or how sophisticated the operation is. About the operating system, I will be using Linux, specifically a Debian 12, but if you are a user of another distributions or operating systems, you can still follow the course with no problem, since the only tool that we want to use during the course is a simple terminal that is available for all operating systems. The only thing that you may need to do a little bit research for if you're not a Linux user is the server installation process if you have not already installed MySQL Server on your system. The last thing I want to tell you about is the course material and lectures. This course is made of more than 40 short and long videos, and during that we will be learning about installing, uninstalling, securing the server, controlling the service, working with users on privileges, monitoring and controlling processes, working with databases, tables, columns, and any type of commands related to them, importing and exporting data using different file types, securing and getting backups, combined, customized, and sophisticated commands, connecting to MySQL using programming languages like PHP, Python, C++, and Bash script, and much more. As you have noticed, this is a serious hands-on project that we're starting together, and I'll do my best to make it as fruitful as possible for you. And instead, I want you to pay attention to every detail that I talk to you about, and if you have the possibility, practice each lesson a few times to make sure your memory has put an anchor on it. Also, note the video description and attachments for source code and other materials that may come with each lesson. This course is presented to you by Arashtad.com. Arashtad is an IT company providing design and development services, products, courses, online tools, affiliate programs, and other types of content. If you're interested in any of those, visit our homepage at arashtad.com and join us there or on other public platforms that we are active on. With all that being said, I appreciate your time and hope this course covers all your need about MySQL. Now, without any further ado, let's get started with the first lesson in the next video. Installing MySQL package on our system or server is the first step that we'll be talking about in this course. If you're using a Mac OS or Windows machine or other types of OSs except Linux, you can head over mysql.com and click on the downloads menu and scroll down to MySQL community version. MySQL has a paid version as well, but the free version that we're about to use in this course is the community version that is absolutely free. You can click on it and then download the installer for Windows or download the package for Mac OS and install it. If you have a problem installation it, you can just do a little bit research and you will find tons of tutorials to get these packages installed on Windows and Mac OSs. But if you're using a Linux machine, follow the rest of the tutorial, so I'll show you how you can get MySQL package installed on your Linux machine. Here inside my Debian machine, I have a terminal window opened and I'm ready to install the package. The first thing that I need to do is, of course, updating the package list, and I'm using apt, so I type sudo apt update to get the apt package list updated. After updating the list, I'm ready to install the package. The package name and apt repository is MariaDB, so I need to do sudo apt install MariaDB-server. And adding a -y flag will answer yes to the confirmation question, and after this, the whole package of MySQL will be installed on our Linux system. And then the only step we need to take after that is securing the installation by running the security script of MySQL that adds a security layer over our MySQL installation. And it's very easy, and it's done by sudo MySQL_secure_ installation. Press enter. The first question is asking for the root password. We have just installed and run the MySQL, so we have no root password yet for it. Leave it blank and press enter. The next question is about switching to the Unix socket authentication. We want to take it, so type Y and press enter. This one is about changing or setting the root password. This is the best place to set a root password for MySQL, so we type Y and press enter. Here we need to type a password that we can remember for it. This is not the system password, this is just a root password for the MySQL installation. Type it once, press enter, and then type it again. And this easy, you can set a root password for your MySQL installation that you will need, of course. So the next question is about removing the anonymous user that is installed by default. We type Y and press enter, and then we want to prevent the root user to log into our server remotely. Another Y, press enter, and that's it. Now we want to remove the test database that is installed by default while installation, so the last Y and press enter, and now we are ready to reload the privileges table for all of the changes to take effect. And that's it. We have installed and secured the MariaDB server on our Linux system. Now, to ensure that the server is installed correctly and it's working properly, we can just test it by logging into it, typing MySQL-u username, in this case root, and -p, and then give it the password that we've just set and logging into it. We must be able to log in this easy to the server after installation, and to test even more, we can execute a simple command like show databases, and as you see, the command is executed and is returning correctly. Now we want to log out from the server. We can do it by either typing exit or quit. This is the way that we can log in and log out from the server. Now the last step is uninstalling the MySQL in case you need to do that from our Linux system. The way that we want to do it is typing sudo apt remove -- purge flag and then the package name MariaDB-server and typing -y flag to answer yes to the confirmation. Now we want to switch to yes by the arrow key on the keyboard and press yes to complete the uninstallation. Now there are some packages that are no longer in use. Those are the dependencies that have been installed on our system by MySQL installation that are no longer needed. We want to remove them as well to keep the system clean. So we type sudo apt auto remove -y. And this way we can uninstall the dependencies that are no longer in use. This is the whole process of installing, testing, and uninstalling MySQL on our Linux system. In the next videos, we'll be controlling the system, we'll be executing commands, and all those good stuff. This is a quick tip about controlling MySQL server on our Linux system. This is a Linux user tutorial, so follow along if you think that this is good to know for you. MySQL is considered a service on Linux systems, so like other services, it can be controlled via system control or the service keyword. The way that we can control MySQL server, like starting, stopping it, getting its status, reloading it, and things like that, is just like this. We can type sudo systemctl status MySQL, and this way we can retrieve the status of MySQL server. As you see, it's up and running. Now if we want to, for example, stop the server, we can do just like this, sudo systemctl, and this time stop MySQL. If I retrieve the status again, we will see that it's inactive. And of course, to start it again is the start keyword that we need to use. Again, status, it's reloaded. There are other keywords to use along systemctl, like restart, reload, enable, disable, and things like that. If you want to know more about the systemctl, because it's not about MySQL, you can just do a little bit research. System control is a very powerful service that you can use on your Linux system and control MySQL server as well via its commands. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about logging in to MySQL server and then customizing the login string so we can have more control over the login process. The proper way to log into MySQL server is typing MySQL-u, the username, in this case root, and then -p. After pressing enter, the system will ask you for the password for the root user, and after entering the password and pressing enter, you can log into your server. This way you can log in properly, and to log out from it you can type exit or quit as said, or if you're using a Linux terminal, you just press Ctrl+C on your keyboard. So now let's say that we have some ports other than the default port, or some host names that are not the default host name for MySQL, and we want to log into the server using those elements. So MySQL will come first again, and -u, the username, and -p for password. Now with a -h flag we can specify the host name. If I type something here, it will be considered the host name. Since I'm using the default host name for MySQL and it's localhost, I type it here. Some settings and some installations and some configurations may need to change the localhost, the host name, and this way you can specify the host name. If you're using multiple host names or you've changed the host name, you can specify it here via login. The other thing is port, that is -P. The default port for MySQL is 3306, but again, if you have a configuration that has changed the port for MySQL, you can specify it here. If I press enter, again, I can log in with the same password, since the localhost is my current host name and this is my current port. So this is the way that you can customize the host name and port while logging into MySQL server. Creating MySQL users is a very common task that we usually do. Whenever we create a new database for an application, for a website, we need to create a user and grant privileges on that specific database to the user so it can individually manage it. It's not recommended to just use the root user to manage all of the databases, and it's not logical in case of security and project logic. So in this tutorial, we'll be talking about creating and dropping users and working with privileges, so you will have a comprehensive understanding about this subject. To create a MySQL user, we need to be logged into the server as a high-privileged user who can access to all of these type of commands, like creating users and working with privileges. So I log into my server using the root username by typing mysql-u root-p and give it a password. After login, the only thing we need to do to create a user is type in create user and give it a username. Let's call it Arashtad. It can be everything. And localhost is the host name, as I'm using the default host name of MySQL. Localhost is the host name. After that, by typing identified by, we can introduce a password for it. Please note that this password must be strong. Use uppercase and lowercase letters, use special characters, and also numbers, all of them combined in your password to make it as strong as possible. But for the sake of time, in this tutorial, I give it a very simple password. After I press enter, it will return a query. Okay, it means that the user has been created. So far, we have created the user, but this user cannot do a lot on our server because we have not granted any privileges to it. The next step is granting privileges that we want over a database to this user so it can manage it. Let's say that we have a database called MySQL Tutorials, and inside that database we have a table called Lessons. Let's see how we can grant privileges to this specific user on that database and that table. The command structure will be something like this: grant privilege name, and then privileges keyword on database name, period, table name, to, inside quotations, username, and @ host name. This is the structure of the command. So let's say that we want to grant select privileges to this user. Don't worry about the name of the privileges. We will get to that later in the next videos and work with all of those privileges. But for now, just mention the structure of granting command. So we can type select, that is the name of a privilege. If we want to add more privileges, we can separate it by comma. Also, to grant all privileges to a user, we just can simply type all. And after that, we need to specify the actual name of the database that we want to grant the privilege to. If we want to grant the privilege on just a specific database, we can type the database name here. Otherwise, if we want to grant privilege on all of the databases on the server, we can just simply put a star here. Also, this is accurate for the table name. We can specify a table name or put a star to grant privileges on all tables. And after that, the username, we created the Arashtad username, and the host name would be localhost. And this is an actual command for this server that we can use. If I press enter, it will return a query. Okay, it means that all the privileges are granted to this user over all of the databases and all of the tables. Now, to check the privileges that we have granted, we can use the command show grants for username at hostname. I press enter and it returns all of the privileges that we have. We have granted all privileges on all databases and all tables to this username, and this is the hash password. So far, we have created a user and we have granted privileges. Now, let's say that we want to revoke these privileges from this user. This is very easy and very similar to the previous command. We can type revoke all, for example, privileges on all of the databases and all of the tables from username at hostname. And this will revoke all of the privileges on all databases and all tables. Again, we also can here do select. If we type this, only the select privilege will be revoked. Also, we can separate it with comma and add more privileges to mention some more privileges, but putting all here will revoke all of the privileges. I press enter, and now if I do show grants, it will have only the usage privilege that is just log into the server. So far we have reviewed the revoke process. Now let's say that we want to remove the Arashtad username from the server completely. This is done by typing drop user username at hostname, and this will remove the user from the server completely. So in this video you learned how to create users, how to grant privileges and check privileges for user, revoke privileges, and how to drop users. This is all you need to know about creating users and working with privileges while creating a new project and database for your website or application. As a server administrator, you have tools and commands available to you to check and control the processes that are running on your server. In this video, we just touch the surface and tell you about those type of tools and how you can use them, so you are aware that what is happening on your server and you can control it better. Let's log into the server using the root user that has all control over the server. And as soon as we log into the server, a session is created for this login. We can show the processes, including the login that is running on our server, by doing show process lists. And this will return a session that is created for the root user and has an ID attached to it. Now let's say that we want to create another session at the same time by logging into the server also as another user. And this means another session will be created. If I repeat the command, we will see that another session for this user with this ID is created. As the administrator, we can end processes by typing kill and then the process ID. It doesn't mean that this user will be logged out, but it means that this specific session with this ID will be terminated. If I do this and show the process list again, we will see that the process is ended. Now, there are more commands that you can watch your server with. For example, show status, and it will return the status of your server. You can use the commands to change the status, but for this video, we will just talk about using the commands to watch the server. The other command that you have available to you is show variables, and these are the variables that assign the behavior of your MySQL server. Also, again, you have commands to change these variables to tweak the behavior of your MySQL server, and you will learn much more about these type of commands and controls while you're working with your server as administrator or as a user. In MySQL, we have a command called flush, and it's used to clear caches and reload data and reload the configuration settings. Whenever you make any change in the configuration files of your MySQL server, or you do any change on the privileges of the tables, things like that, you can use the flush command to reload the data and refresh them to make sure that the changes have taken effect and the other users can see your changes immediately. One example of flush is doing it on the privileges. We talked about users, permissions, and privileges in the previous video, and here you can see an example of flushing privileges that is done by typing flush privileges, and this will reload all the permissions on the server. Also, doing flush tables will reload all the data inside the tables on your server. We have another command that is flush hosts, and this will refresh the records about the hosts that are allowed to access the MySQL server. Also, we have a flush status that sets all the variables on the server to 0, and it's very useful when you're about to monitor and watch the processes on your server. Another usage for the flush command is doing flush logs, and this will close and reopen all the log files and reset them. The log files like query logs and error logs and so on. Also, if you have a select query stored in the memory, you can clear that cache by doing flush query cache. And these are different usage of this command that helps you reload and refresh the data and make sure that all the data are up to date. In MySQL, databases are the main categories that we put data in. We create databases, and inside those databases, we create tables, and inside those tables, we will have columns that carry the actual data. So the database is the main category. In this video, we'll be talking about databases, how we can create them, how we can delete them, how we can search between them, and how we can customize the search query so we get the result exactly the way we want. To create a database, the only thing we need to do is type in create database and then putting the name. Let's call it test and press enter. Now I get a query OK, and the database is created. For deleting a database, I need to type drop database and then the name of the database. This easy, we can create or delete databases. Now let's see how we can index the database names in our server and how we can search between their names. If I type show databases and press enter, the command will return all of the database names available on our server. Now let's say that we want to search between these names and only index those ones that have a schema at the end of their name. To do a search like this, we need to type show databases and then type like and put a percentage sign, and after the percentage sign type the word that we are looking for. This command means that we're looking for the table names that have something at the beginning, something or nothing, but the schema is the end word of their name. The name must be ended with schema because we have a percentage sign here, but nothing at the end. So at the end just is a schema that must be included at the end of the database names that we are looking for. I press enter and I get two results that are ended with a schema. If I remove the percentage sign at the beginning, it means that the database names that we are looking for must be exactly like a schema. If I press enter, I'll get an empty string. Now let's say that we want to search between names that are started with a schema but ended with something else or nothing. So this one will return an empty string as well because we don't have any table that is started with schema. Actually, we have only two tables that are ended with this word. Let's do another search to make it even more clear. Show databases like percentage sign SQL percentage sign, and this means that SQL must be somewhere in the name. It can be started with something else and ended with something else, but the string SQL must be in their name. I press enter and get two results because here I have two tables that have SQL in their names. If I remove the SQL, the percentage sign at the end, this string means that at the beginning we can have other characters, but the ending of the search must be SQL. I press enter and this time get one table name because we have only one table that is ended with SQL, and that's this one. In MySQL, we have a variety of data types, but the ones that are used the most and most projects are numeric data types, string data types, and date and time data types. In this video, we'll be talking about these specific groups of data types. In case of numeric data types, we have int, that stands for integer, we have decimal, and also we have float and double. What's the difference? When you use int for a column, MySQL is expecting only correct numbers like 1, 2, 3 to be inserted without any decimal point. But when you want to use a number that has a decimal point to it, you can use either decimal or float and double. Now, when you use a decimal data type, you need to specify the exact amount of numbers that comes after and also before the decimal point. For example, when you use a decimal inside parentheses, you specify 8, 2, it means that you're allowed to use a number, a decimal number that has 8 numbers, 8 correct numbers before the decimal point and only 2 numbers after the decimal point. If you want more freedom and be able to use any type of decimal numbers, you can use float or double that has no limitation in the amount of numbers that you can put before and after decimal. String data types. This group has 3 types: char, that stands for character, varchar, that stands for variable character, and text. Let's see what's the difference between them. Char is used when you're sure about the exact number of characters that are supposed to be inserted in a certain column. Let's say that you have a column and you have assigned a char 10 data type to that column. In this case, MySQL is expecting a record that has exactly 10 characters length. If you're trying to insert a record with more than 10 characters, MySQL will generate an error, of course, because you have limited that column to only 10 characters. But if you're trying to insert a record with less characters, for example 5 will be left blank, and those blank space will be filled by MySQL that actually takes place on your physical memory. So you will have some physical memory used for blank spaces, and it's not logical to use, in case of economizing your hardware resources, to use char for records that you're not sure about the exact length of them. If you want to be able to use any type of length for a specific column and you're sure about the limit, for example, let's say you have a column, you know that it will be variable. Sometimes it can be 5 characters, sometimes it can be 8, 3, 7, 9, but it won't reach the limit of 10. You can use a varchar for this time. When you use a varchar 10, for example, MySQL has a limit of 10 characters, but if you're trying to insert a record with less than 10 characters, the blank space won't take place, won't be filled with anything on your physical memory, and it's much more logical in case of economizing the hardware resources. So varchar is one of the most used data types in MySQL because of this flexibility. In this group of string data types, text has the most flexibility in case of length. So when you assign a text data type to a column, that column can take unlimited number of characters. The difference between them, between text and char and varchar, is that you cannot limit the text data type to a specific number of characters, but in case of length, it is unlimited. The last group of data type that we will be talking about in this video is date and time. When you have a column and you want to insert a date format into it that has years, month, and days, you can use the date data type. Time is used when you want to use a specific time of the day that takes hours, minutes, and seconds. But if you want to be able to insert all of them together from year to seconds, you can use datetime and timestamp. Datetime and timestamp take years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. These are 3 groups that we will be using, and in the next videos we will be using them in our columns and tables in action, and you will see how it goes when we're working with these type of data and data types in real-life projects. In MySQL, tables are the subcategories of databases where we create columns that stores the actual data. First, we have databases, and then inside a database, we can create multiple tables, and each table can carry one or more column that actually stores the actual data. In this video, we'll be talking about tables, how we can create them, how we can search them, and describe them. First, let's log into the MySQL server using the DB username, and then list all of the databases by typing show databases. And as you see, we have a database called MySQL Tutorials. Let's use it. And now that we're inside the MySQL Tutorials database, we can type show tables to list all tables inside this database. Let's pick the table lessons and see the structure. To see the structure of a table, we can type describe and then the name of the table. As you see, we have two fields, ID and title. These are the data types, and the rest of specification qualities of this column. Now let's create a new column, new database, and see how we can create a table from scratch. To create a table, we need to type create table and then the name of a table that we want to assign to it. Let's call it test for this case, and inside the parentheses we need to specify the columns of that table. Let's create a column called ID with the data type int, and then to introduce more columns we can separate them by commas. The next column will be title, that has the varchar 255 data type, and let's create another column separated by comma. Let's call it description. This will be the name, and the data type will be text. If I press enter, the table will be created. Now if I do show tables, we'll see that the table test has been created, and if I type describe test, it will return the structure of the table that we just created. So far, we found out how we can index the tables and how we can see the structure of the tables inside a database. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is deleting or dropping a table, and that's very easy. Just type drop table and then the name of the table, press enter, and the table will be dropped. If I do show tables again now, we will see that the table test has been deleted. This video described the table creation, deletion, and how we can find out the specification of a table, the structure of it. And in the next videos, we'll be going deeper inside the subject and we'll altering the table to modify the structure of it, and we'll change and modify the columns and their qualities. In MySQL, we have some qualities that we can set for each column inside a table and have more control over the functionalities of that column. In this video, we'll be talking about foreign key, not null, and unique, that are some of those qualities and can give us much more flexibility in working with MySQL tables. Let's first start with foreign key. We use foreign key when we want to relate a column inside a table to another column inside another table. This is known also as the parent-child relationship. Let's say that we have a table called students, and inside this table we have a column called student underscore ID. That is primary key. Basically, primary key means that there won't be any two rows inside this table with the same record as a student. It will be unique. We will talk about primary key later on in the next lessons, but for now, just know that the student ID will be a unique record stored inside each row, and there won't be two rows with the same record inside this table. Also, we have another table called courses, and this courses table has a specific column inside it called a student ID as well. It can be anything, but this student ID is the column that we want to use as the child column related to the student ID inside the student table. We can do it like this: student ID, then the data type, and after that we can type foreign key. Inside the parentheses we can type the column name, and the reference will be the column name inside the other table, that is the students. This is the structure of foreign key when we want to relate and reference another column from another table to a column inside our table. Also, we have some options in hand that we can use, so when the parent column is either updated or deleted, the corresponding changes will be made on the records on the child column. So for example, cascade, set null, restrict, and no action with the functionalities that you are seeing on the screen can be used, so when the parent column is updated or deleted, the child item will be affected. Here's an example of triggering the cascade function when one record on the parent item is deleted. This part is a little bit sophisticated, so I describe it slower, and you need to focus on it a little bit more. Let's say that we have two tables, orders and order items. Inside the orders table, we have a column called order underscore ID that is primary key, and we want to use it as the parent column. Inside the other table that is order underscore items, we have another column with the same name, order underscore ID, that we want to use as the child column, and we want to relate it with the column with the same name on the orders table. We have done it using the foreign key, and as you see, the order underscore ID column inside order underscore items table is now connected to the order underscore ID column of orders table using foreign key. Now let's say that we want to set an action for deletion on the parent column. The parent column is inside our orders table, and let's say that we have a record in this table that has order underscore ID 1. Now we want to delete the same record on the order underscore items table when the record on the parent column inside the orders table is deleted. In this case, we can type on delete cascade, just the last line of this screen. This means that when we delete a record with order underscore ID 1 from the orders table, the same record with the same order underscore ID on the order underscore items table will be deleted. I know this may look a little bit confusing, but actually it's very simple. When we delete the parent record, the child record will be deleted with a simple line of code on delete cascade. So if you had a little bit problem understanding the subject, please watch it again so it will be more clear to you. Now, as said previously, we can use those four actions for update and delete, but these actions are not available for insert or create. So when we have a new record inserted in the parent item and we want to make changes on the child item, we need to use another technique that is called trigger. And this is the structure of the command that we can create to take effect on the child items when the parent item, the parent column, has a new record inserted into it. In this video, we're not talking about triggers, as we will dedicate a complete video only to triggers, and we'll be talking about triggers in detail in that video. But just have in mind that those four actions are only available for update and delete, and if we want to trigger any action on insert or create new records for the child item, we need to use triggers. The other column quality that we want to talk about in this video is null and not null. By default, columns are set to null in MySQL, but when we set a column to not null, it means that this specific column must have a data on each record. When we are trying to insert a record in a table, and we are not presenting any data for the column that is set to not null, we'll get an error saying that you're trying to insert empty record in this column, and this column is set to not null, and it means that must have a data, and so this is the cause of the error. So not null means that we must have record for that column, basically. The last column quality that we'll talk about in this video is unique. When we set a column to unique, it means that all records on this table must have a unique entry for this specific column. Let's say that we have a table called users and we have set two fields of username and email to unique. In this case, no two users are allowed to use the same username or email for their accounts, and all usernames and emails inserted in this table must be unique. That's it for this video, and in the next videos we'll be using these qualities in our commands and code, so you will be more familiar with using them while you're working on real-life projects. When we want to make changes on a table structure and the qualities of a column inside a table, in MySQL, we usually use alter commands. This is the name of a set of commands that we can use to add, modify, delete, or update columns and their structures inside our MySQL tables. In this video, we'll be talking about alter commands and how we can use them to modify and tweak our MySQL tables in order to make it fit to our needs. Basically, all of the alter commands have the same structure, but they're different in the action part. The overall structure is alter table and then the table name, whatever it is, and this last part is action that is different in each of them. In this video, we'll be working on each type of alter command, and you will see how we can use them in real-life projects. Here I'm logged into MySQL server and I'm using the database MySQL_tutorials. First, let's take a look at the tables by doing show tables. And as you see, we have a table called lessons. Now let's take a look at the structure of this table by doing describe lessons. And as you see, we have two columns here. One is ID with the data type int11, and the other one is title with data type varchar 255. Let's say that we want to modify this table and change the title column to varchar 100 data type. In this case, we can type alter table lessons, that is the name of the table, and then the action that we want to take. The action is modifying a column, so we type modify column and then the name of the column, title, and here we can type whatever we want in case of the column quality. We want to change the data type, so we just need to type the new data type that we want to assign this to this column. So I type varchar 100, press enter, and now if I do describe lessons again, we will see that the data type has been changed to 100 from 255. This is the way that we can use the modify alter command to change an existing column inside our table. The other usage of the alter commands is adding a new column to a table. In this case, we can type alter table lessons, that is the name of a table, and this time add column. And here we can type the name of the column, let's call it description, and then the data type that will be text, and also another quality that will be not null. Here, when I press enter and do show table again, describe table again, we will see that the field description with the same data type that we set is here, and it is not null. This is the way that we can add a new column to a table using alter table. The last command that I want to talk to you about is deleting a column from a table using alter table. In this case, we want to type alter table, the name of the table, and then drop column, and then the name of the column that we want to drop. In this case, it's description. If I press enter, we will see that the column has been dropped, and if I do describe lessons again, we will see that this description field is no longer existed. And this is how we can use the alter table commands to modify our table and tweak it as we want. In MySQL, the insert command is the one that we want to use when we want to insert some records into an existing table. In this video, we'll be talking about the insert command and how we can use it to put data into our tables. The structure of this command is something like this. We want to type insert into, and then the table name, and inside a parenthesis we need to specify the column name. And if we want to add more column, we can separate it by comma, for example, like this. And then we want to type the keyword values. And then inside another parenthesis, we need to specify the new records data for call 1, separated by comma, call 2 records. Something like this. Now let's see how we can use it in actual projects. Here inside a MySQL_tutorials database, we have some tables. First, let's take a look at the tables by doing show tables. And I want to see what's inside the lessons table now. Select all from lessons is a command that will index all of the data inserted into this table. As you see, we have 6 records here, and we want to insert one more. So I type insert into lessons, and I want to insert title. So I type title, that is the name of this column, and after that values, and then the value that I want to insert into it. So I type lesson 7, for example, insert into tables. Note that I've used quotations to insert this data because it's in a string, and if we want to put in a string, we want to wrap it inside quotations. If I press enter, the new record will be inserted, and if I do a select, again we'll be seeing that the new record has been inserted. This easy, we can insert into our MySQL tables using the insert command. In the previous video, we talked about using the insert command to load data into our MySQL table. In this video, we'll be talking about another method that we can load data into our MySQL tables, and that's using a txt file that has some data in it, and we want to load the data inside the txt file in our table in order to create records in our MySQL table. First, let's log into the server using the DB user, and then use the MySQL_tutorials database, and then let's list the tables by show tables. And here we still have the lessons table, and describe lessons will return the structure of this table. And if I do a select all from lessons, we see that we only have one record in it. The table has 2 columns, ID and title, and we want to create a text file with these 2 columns that have new records in it, and we want to load all those data into this table as new records. So I open another terminal window, and I want to create a file called data.txt inside the directory of this database. So I use the Vim text editor to create this data.txt file and navigate to the related directory that in Linux systems is inside var lib MySQL, and then the name of the database, MySQL_tutorials, and here is where I want to create the data.txt file. Now inside this file I can create records. First I need to put IDs. The second ID will be 2 after this 1, and then I press tab, and I can now write some titles for the second row. I type install and uninstall, and then press enter to go to the next line. Then the next ID, again press tab, and the next title will be, for example, create databases, and then for the next ID, and the title will be create tables, and that's enough for this. I save the file and go to my SQL command. To load data into my table, I can type load data in file, and then the name of the file, that is data.txt. We don't need any extra path because the file is already located inside the database directory. And after that, into table lessons, that is the name of the table, and we have some options to introduce, that is, for example, fields terminated by \t standing for tabs, and then lines terminated by \n, that is for new line. And then inside parentheses we can introduce the column names that we want to insert into, and this is the whole command for loading data from a txt file. I press enter and then go to select all from lessons, and we will see that all of those 3 new columns are inserted into our table. This is how we can load new data from our txt file. Doesn't matter how many records are inserted in that txt file. This is a very simple way to load data into our MySQL table using a simple txt file. In the previous video, we loaded some data from a txt file into our MySQL table. Now let's take a look at the records that we loaded by doing select star from lessons, and these last 3 records are the ones that we loaded from a txt file. Now we want to create a CSV file called data.csv and put some records in it and load them into the table, this time instead of the txt file. To do that, I go to a separated terminal window and use the Vim text editor. You can use any type of text editor, it doesn't matter. And I create a file called data.csv right inside my home directory and start editing it. The first column name is ID, and this time instead of pressing tab, we need to separate the fields by comma. So I type comma and then title. And this is the structure of the table, right? So I can press enter to go to the next lines and put some records here that will be loaded into our table. The next ID after the 4th one will be 5 and separated by comma. The next title, let's call the next title #5 loading data from txt. I press enter and type 6 as the ID of the next record, and as the title I type loading data from CSV. These 2 records are the ones that will be loaded. I will ignore the first row when I'm executing the command on the SQL command line, so you can see how we can do this. For now, let's just save this text CSV file here and get back to our MySQL command line, and the command to load data from a CSV file into our table will be something like this. Load data. We add a local keyword here to load a file outside the MySQL directory, and then in file, then the full path to the file, that will be home, Arashtad, and data.csv. If you're curious about the path that I found it here, that will be the directory that I've created. The CSV file is already home/Arashtad, and if I do a cat home Arashtad data.csv, we will see that this file exists and the content is loaded. So I put the full path to the CSV file here, and after that I can type into table lessons and then fields terminated by commas, since we have separated the fields by comma here, and then lines terminated by \n, that stands for line break. Also, we had an extra row here that is representing the name of the tables, and we want to ignore this first line, so only the actual records are loaded into our table. So to do that, we can type ignore one rows. This is the command that we will be executing, and as you see, the records are added to our table. If we do a select star from lessons again, you will see that the new records 5 and 6 are loaded from our CSV file. This is the way that we can load data from a CSV into our MySQL table. So far, we've been executing our commands directly inside our MySQL command line. But in this video, we'll be talking about another technique that we can use, and that's using a .sql file, that is a system file for MySQL type servers, and load the commands that are stored in that SQL file inside our MySQL databases. First, we create a .sql file inside our MySQL directory. In Linux, it's inside the var directory. I use Vim editor to create this file and go to var web MySQL, that is a system directory for MySQL installation, and here I want to create a file called data.sql, and here I can insert some data, some commands that I want to execute. Let's take a look at the table structure that we want to work on it. In the previous videos, we were working on the lessons table inside MySQL_tutorials database. Now I do a select star from lessons to see the records, and here we have 6 records here. Let's say that we want to create a command that inserts some data inside this table. So I go to the SQL file and type insert into lessons. Here will be the column names, and after the values keyword will be the actual data. The columns that I want to work on are ID and title, and the values for it will be ID 7, it comes after the 6th one, and inside quotations, as we are about to put a string, we can do something like this: executing command from external.sql file, and this will be the title of the 7th row that we want to insert. So this is the insert command that we talked about before that, but inside this insert we can put everything, as said, everything that is available to MySQL command line can be put here. I just save this file here, and now we have a file in this directory with this name. Let's copy this, and here we just need to type source and then the path to the SQL file. If I type this and press enter, the query will be executed, and now if I type select star from, we will see that the new record have been inserted, and this is a command that we have executed from our txt file. Now let's give another example, and here is the file again. Instead of this insert command, if I type, for example, delete from lessons where ID equals 7, and save this file and execute it again, you will see that the 7th record is terminated. I just gave this second example for you to see whatever command that is available for MySQL command line is available for MySQL files as well. Otherwise, don't worry about that delete or where clause. We will be talking about them in detail in the future, so you will see how we can work with those type of statements. So this is the way that we can use an external .sql file to execute any type of MySQL command on our server. In SQL language, the select command is the one that we want to use when we are about to gathering information and retrieving data from a MySQL table. There are options that come with this command that makes us able to tweak the information gathered and to customize the output in the way that we want. In this video, we'll be talking about the select command and how we can use those options that come with it. The basic syntax of the select command is something that I'm going to type, but first note that I'm inside the MySQL_tutorials database, and as you see in the previous videos, we have a table here called lessons that already has some data stored in it. To gather information from this table, I type select star from lessons, and this star means all. If I want to gather all information from this table, I put a star here. Otherwise, I can specify the name of the column or columns that I want to gather information from, something like this, and separate them by comma. But if I want all information, I just simply put in the star here and press enter. As you see, all the data inside this table are retrieved this way. Now, it's time to talk about the options. Where and operators is one of the options that we have. Let's use it to make it more clear. So select star from lessons and then where, and now ID, the column name, equals 1. This command means select all the tables, all the records from this lessons table where ID equals 1. Only for one row that has the ID 1, all the data will be retrieved. As you see, ID and title, that is all the information for this record is retrieved. Also, instead of equal, we can use greater or less than operators, and it will return the associated data. If I type select star from lessons where ID is greater than 3, only the records with ID more than 3 will be returned. As you see, ID 4 is the first record that is retrieved, and it goes on to the end. Also, for less than operator, it's available, and it will retrieve the expected records. The other option that I want to talk about is using limit. If I do select star from lessons and type the limit keyword and set it to, for example, 3, only 3 records of this list will be returned. And now you will see that only 1, 2, 3 record is retrieved. The last option that I want to talk about is order by. By default, MySQL has the ascending order by, and if we want to set the order by to descending, we can simply type it. The way that we can use it is something like this. Select a star from lessons and then order by ID, that is the name of one of the columns, and then we can type the ordering that we want. I've set it to descending, so if I execute it, the records will be ordered in the descending format regarding their IDs. These are the options that we have while using the select command. The last thing that I want to talk to you about in this lesson is that we are able to use multiple options while using the select command. Let's take a look at this example. I type select star from lessons and then where ID is greater than 2. As you know, this command will return 4 records, ID 3 to 6, but if I use another option beside this and limit the records to 2, it will return only 2 first records after the ID 2, that is ID 3 and 4, and I execute it, and as expected, you see that both these options that we have used on select command are working together. And this is the way that we can use multiple options in a single command and using the select command on our MySQL tables. In the previous video, we talked about select command and the options that come with it and how we can use those options to customize our search between records inside a MySQL table. In this video, we'll be talking about two operators that we can add to our search query so we can customize it even more. One of the operators is AND and the other one is OR. Let's see how we can use these two operators in our search query. Currently, I'm logged into the MySQL server and I want to use the MySQL_tutorials database and do a show tables to see all tables inside it. We have a students table here with some records in it. Let's take a look at all records stored in this table, doing select all from students. And we have 8 records here with some first names, last names, and scores. Let's say that we want to search between these students and find out those who have a letter in their first name and they have scores more than 7. To use AND operator in such a search, we can type select all from students where first name like percentage and the score is above 7, and this will return all students with score more than 7 that have a somewhere in their first name. Now let's work on the OR operator example. Let's say that we are looking for students who have either A in their first name or the letter C in their last names. This way we can use select all from students where first name like percentage or last name like %C %. This way only the users with A in their first name or C in their last name will be returned. As expected, all these records have either A in their first name or C in their last names. And this is how we can use the AND and OR operators in our select query and customize the search even more. In MySQL, when we want to create a pattern for our select or other queries, one of the most powerful and useful options that we have is using regex. Regex stands for regular expressions, and it provides a pattern of characters and letters that actually is used in too many programming languages as well as SQL. In this video, I'll be giving you an example of using regex in a MySQL select command so you can get more familiar with it. But if you're interested in finding more about regex, you can do a research about it and find out more. Let's say that we have a table with some records in it and we want to create a pattern to search between the first names. We are interested in the records that have CO letters in their name, but before the CO we want to create a pattern that accepts I and R letters. So to do this we need to type select all or any field name from students where first name, since we are filtering the first name column, and here we need to type regex p as regular expression pattern, and inside a quotation we need to create a pattern. For the constant, the common part, we can just type them in simply, but for the variable part we need to type a bracket and mention the pattern, the variable parts inside the bracket. In this case we are looking for I and R that comes before CO. When I press enter, I give 2 records with CO and their first name that have a I or R letters before the CO. So this is the way that we can use regex in our select command. Of course, there are a lot of more use cases for using regex in our MySQL commands, and I seriously encourage you to have a research about this subject because it's a very useful and powerful tool to know about for MySQL and every other programmer. In MySQL, we have options to get sum, average, minimum, and maximum of multiple numeric entries. In this video, we'll be talking about those options, and I'll give you some examples about each of them. Here inside our MySQL underscore tutorials database, we have a table called students that has a column called score, and this score column takes numeric entries as the score of each student. Let's take a look at the sum option and how we can use it in our select command to get the sum of all these numeric entries together. This is the structure of the sum command. We need to mention the column name inside the parenthesis after the sum keyword, and then we can name it after the as keyword and from table, and then we can use a where condition if there's any condition that we want to mention. Now let's see how we can use it on the command line. Here we're back to the command line and we want to get the sum of the score column. To do that, I can type select sum. Inside the parenthesis I mentioned the column name and as total score. This is optional, you can name it whatever you want, and then from students, and let's not use any condition here. Please note that we are already inside our MySQL underscore tutorials. We are using it, so I press enter and I get a number that is actually sum of all these scores together. Also, using conditions with this command is very easy. Just type where and then the condition. Let's say that we want to get the scores only greater than 8. In this case, we can type score greater than 8, and this time we're getting a record that is the sum of the scores that only have a value more than 8. So this is how we can use sum and use conditions with it. Now let's move on to the next one, that is average. The way that we can use average is very similar to sum. The only difference is between their keywords, that in this case it's AVG, standing for average. Let's see how we can get the average score of all the students that we have on our students table. Back to the students table, and this time we type select AVG and then the column name, that is score, and as AVG score. Again, this is optional, you can name it whatever you want, and then the name of the table from students. And this is the average score of all students. Again, we can use the where condition as well here. For example, where ID is greater than 3, and this time we get another average number. And this is the way that we can use average in our SQL commands. Now let's talk about minimum and maximum. The structure of the command for getting minimum or maximum of multiple numeric numbers is exactly the same as average and sum. Just in this case, instead of AVG or SUM, we need to type MAX or MIN for minimum and maximum. Let's take a look at the structure. Select, for example, min score, the name of the column, as min score from students. And this is the minimum score, and if we take a look at the scores, we see that 6.3 is the minimum score. And also we can use the max this way, MAX from the score, that is the column name, and then so this one is optional, but let's make it cleaner. And yeah, this is the maximum score that we have on our table. This is how we can use sum, average, minimum, and maximum in our select command in MySQL. These are simple yet very useful options to know about, so I suggest you to have a little bit of practice and experiment with them so you can memorize them better. In MySQL, we have the option to count rows while selecting records from our tables. This is the structure of the command that we will be going to the terminal and using it in a real example. Here I'm logged into the MySQL server. I'm using MySQL tutorials database. Inside this database we have a table called grades that has some records in it. Also a student underscore ID and grade are two of the columns for this table that we want to use in our select command. Let's see how we can use the count option to select between these records. What we are looking for is the students that have grade A. Since a student ID is a unique field and there's no two records similar to each other in this, so when we are searching based on the student IDs, when we count them, we can ensure that each record is representing a unique separated student. So to count them, we can do select count. Inside the parentheses, we can mention the name of the unique field, and then as SID, this is optional, you can name it whatever you want, and then from grades, that is the name of the table. Now we want to add a where clause and say where grade equals A. And this command will return all students with grade A. And as you see, we have two students with this grade here that is returned correctly by the count option. Of course, we can use the count option in more sophisticated commands, but this is a simple example of using this option in our select commands. In SQL, we have a clause called group by that comes in conjunction with the select command, and what it does is merging multiple records that have the same value for a specific column. This is the basic structure of the group by clause, and in this video we'll be talking about this clause and the options that we have while using it. Here in our sales table, we have some records that are related to some products. Each product may be repeated multiple times, and what I'm going to do is summarizing all the sales for each product, so at the end we will have only one row for each product, and the revenue will be the total revenue from that specific product in that row. For this purpose, I do select product ID and separated by comma, another field, summary of revenue, and I name it with as keyword as total revenue from sales table, and here I need to type group by and the name of the field product ID, and this way I can list all of the sales in just one row depending on the product ID. Also, we can step further and add some conditions to our select command that is using group by adding the having keyword and then the conditions that we are looking for. This is the structure of this type of commands, and let's see how it's done. Here we have some products that have sold less or more than 10,000. One of them is less than, and two of them have more than 10,000 revenues. Let's say that we are interested in the products that have more than 10,000 revenues. In this case, we want to use the previous command and add a having condition to it and count the revenues, and then the operator, and then the value. This is the structure. I press enter, and this time I get only two records, and both of them have more than 10,000 revenues. And this is the whole story behind the group by clause and the having filter that you can use in your select commands. One of the useful features of MySQL is join. Join operations let us combine two or more tables together based on a related column that they have in common. There are different types of join operations, and you are seeing them on the screen. For example, inner join, left join, right join, and full join, that in SQL is called full outer join. Full outer join of SQL is not supported in MySQL, but we can emulate it the way that it operates exactly like SQL. In this video, we'll be exploring this join operation and we'll see how we can use it in our commands. Here I'm logged into the MySQL server and we have two tables here in MySQL tutorials database. One of them is students and the other one is grades, and the grades table has a column called student ID that is related to the ID column of a students table. So the student ID 1 will be this record, the student ID 2 will be this record with ID 2. Now let's take a look at the inner join operation. Inner join returns only rows that have matches in both tables. If we have a record in one table that has no match in the other one, it won't be returned by the inner join. Based on our tables and their records inside them, we have a command here that uses inner join, and as I said, it's only returning the records that have matches in both tables. What it does is selecting all records, all columns from the students table, and also the grade and date columns from the grades table. It, of course, involves the students and grades table, and it compares the ID from the students table and the student ID from the grades table. So only the rows that have matches between ID and student ID will be returned. And if there's a record in any of these tables that has no match in the other one, it won't be returned. If I press enter, I get only 8 records, and that's because one of the records in the grades table with student ID 9 has no match with ID 9 in the students table, if that makes sense. And this is how inner join works. Now let's take a look at the other ones. Now let's see how left join works. The left join operation returns all the records from the left table, the students table. We call it left because we're writing it left. We're writing it first and it's the left side, so we call it left. So it will return all the records from the students table, and for the grade and date column that we have added to the response using join, if there's no match in this table for one of these students, the data for these two columns will be null, will be empty. If I press enter, I get no null in response, and that's because we have matches in the grades table for all these students. If I had, for example, 10 students and one or more of them has no match in the grades table, these two columns would be returned as null, as empty. So in the next command, you will see how the null record will be returned, since we have one record in the grades table that has no match in the students. And this is the syntax for the right join operation, and as you see, it's exactly like inner join and left join, except in this one, left or inner has been changed to right. And what it does is returning all columns and records from the right table this time, and if there's no match in the left side for one of those records, empty or null will be returned. Here I have a right join operation in my command, and what it does is, as said, it will return all records from the grades table, all grade and date data from the grades table, and if there's any record in the grades table that has no match in the students table, the columns for the student table of that record will be returned as null. I press enter and I get one column that has some nulls in it, and as you see, it's related to the students table. ID, first name, last name, and score are the columns from the students table, and we have a record in the grades table with students ID 9, but we don't have any student with ID 9, so there's no match for that specific record, and therefore the data that is sent back from the students is null. And this is how left join or right join returns null if there's no match in the other table. Back to the first screen of the video. So now it's time to talk about full join, that is the last one in this tutorial. If you're familiar with SQL, we have a full outer join there, but since it's not supported in MySQL, we have to emulate it using the other join operations that we have in hand. And how it works is that it returns all records from all tables, two or more tables that we have joined together. Of course, we can join more than two tables together. And if there's no match on the other table or tables for this specific record, those columns will be returned as null, just like what you saw in the right join example. Now let's see how it works on the command line. Here I have a left join operation and right join one, and I have connected them together using union, and this is how we can emulate the full outer join operation of SQL and MySQL. Now let's see how it works. It returns all records from a student and also all records from the grades. If there's a record in one of these two tables that has no match in the other one, the other columns will be returned as null. I press enter, and again I'm getting null for these four columns that are related to the students table. And this is why we have a grades with a student's ID 9, but we don't have any student with ID 9 in the students table. And this is how the full join works. In this video, we'll learn different types of join operation in MySQL. And I need to mention that join is one of the operations that happens a lot in software development and real-life projects. There are a lot of cases that we have two or more tables and we want to grab data from one of them based on the field on the other one, and there are a lot of cases. So it's a good idea to take a little bit of time and have practice on this one, because it will ease your projects and developments further. When we want to change the data stored in a table for one or more columns and rows, we need to use the update command. The update command has a syntax like this. First we type update, then the name of the table, then we can set the value for one or more columns, and at the end we can specify conditions. Now let's go to the terminal and see how it works in real examples. As you saw in the previous lessons, we have a table called the students in MySQL tutorials database. I want to trace all the records by select, and this is the records that we have stored in this table. Let's say we want to update the score for the student with ID 2 from 8.3 to 8.5. In this case, we type update students, that is the name of the table, and then the set keyword, and then the field. The score equals 8.5. I don't need to use quotation because the score takes integers, and integers doesn't need to be wrapped in quotations in this case. And then where ID equals 2 is the condition that works on the student ID 2. Now if I do a select again, we will see that the score has been updated. Now let's see how we can update more than one column. For example, this record, we want to update both last name and score as well. In this case, we do update the students set last name equals, this time we need to wrap it in quotation because it's a string, and then we can add more columns by separating them by comma, and score equals 8.9, where ID equals 5. And select again, and you see that both last name and score are updated. Update is a simple yet very common and useful command that you need to know about it. Of course, for the condition, we can use other operators like greater, less than, or other operators that we talked about in the previous videos, but this was a very simple example for you to understand the structure and the functionality of the update command. When we want to remove a record from a table, we use delete command. This is the syntax for the delete command, and as you see, it's very simple. Delete from the table name and then the condition. In this video, we'll be talking about this command and how we can use it in our real projects. Here I'm using MySQL tutorials database, and I have a table called students. And these are the records in this table. And let's say that this last one is the row that we want to delete. In this case, we type delete from students, the name of the table, and then directly the condition where ID equals 9. It will remove the ID 9 record from the table, and if I do select again, the record ID 9 doesn't exist anymore. This easy, we can delete one or more rows from our table. Now there's something to talk about here. If I do describe students here, you'll see that the ID field is auto increment. It means that if we push some data into this table and we don't mention any record for the ID field, MySQL server will be generating IDs after IDs for this specific field by itself. Since we deleted the record with ID 9 and we didn't reset the auto increment number, the next ID that is generated by MySQL is 10. It means that if we push some data into it, MySQL will generate IDs from 10. It will jump from 8 to 10 since we have removed the ID 9 and we didn't reset the auto increment number for this table. In some cases, we are keen about the IDs and we want all of them to exist and be sorted correctly. In those cases, when we delete a record or some records, we need to reset the auto increment number to that specific number. So after we insert new data into it, the correct number will be generated by MySQL. In this case, we need to use the alter command this way, alter table, and then the name of the table, students in this case, and this time instead of add, remove, or modify column, we need to do auto increment. And simply we type the number that we want to set for the table. And this easy, we can reset the auto increment number for a specific table. This was a little small trick about deleting the records and setting auto increment numbers if you want to use that. Subqueries, also known as nested queries, are the queries that we usually write inside another query to get some data that is initial to the main query. This gives us ability to create more complex and sophisticated commands and calculate a result based on a result from another command. In this video, we'll be talking about subqueries and how we can benefit from them. Now let's take a look at a simple example of the syntax. Here we have selected from table 1 as the main query, and inside the parenthesis we have nested another select command that is selecting from table 2. The select command on table 2 is called subquery or nested query. It calculates some data and gives it to the main query that is selecting from table 1, so the main query has some data to calculate based on it. Now let's go to the terminal and see how it works on real-life examples. Here inside our MySQL tutorials database, we have two tables, products and sales. And some of the products in this table have some records inside the sales table with some revenues, sales dates, and other data. Now let's see how we can create a nested query that calculates some data from the sales table and gives it to the main query so it can select some products from the main table, from the products table. If I type this command, we have selected from products based on the IDs if the ID is inside the sales table and the product ID has total revenue more than 10,000. So the nested query will be this one that comes inside the parenthesis. The parenthesis is the key in nested query. So when a product has sold more than 10,000, it will be returned as the ID of the product to the main query, and the product ID will be shown. I press enter and we will see only one record, that is the product C with the ID 3 that has revenue more than 10,000. This is a very simple example about a nested query. Another example of using subqueries is something like this. We have the main query here that is selecting the name field, and since we are interested in the max revenue and the max revenue is from another table, we create a subquery inside the main one that selects the maximum revenue from the sales table as a subquery, and then the rest of the main query that is selecting from the products. So we have selected from two tables here. One, the main query is selecting from products, and Second, the subquery is selecting from the sales. I press enter and I have two fields here. The name that is selected by the main query and max revenue resulted by the calculation of the subquery. Another example from this type is something like this. We have the main query here, again, is selecting the name field from the product's ID, and also this main query is creating a link, an alias to the product's table by the letter P, and we are using this link inside our subquery here. And this is our subquery that is counting the number of sales for each product, where the product ID on the sales table is equal to the ID field of the products table, if that makes sense. So I press enter, and here I have two columns, name and total sales. Name is selected from the products table and lists all the products created in our products table, and in front of them, based on the count clause of the nested query, we have total sales for each of them. As you see, we have some records here that have not made any sales. If we want to retrieve only the products that have some sales on the sales table, we can use the exist keyword like this. Again, the main query here is selecting the name field and linking the letter P to the products table, and this time only the existing records that have some sales from the sales table will be retrieved. When I press enter, I just get the products A to C that have some sales on the sales table. And the last example I want to give you is this one. We are selecting products ID from the sales table. This time the products table is not involved. We are just working on the sales table. We're selecting products ID, and also we want to calculate the total revenue for each product, because some of the products have more than one sales, and we want the sum, the all revenue added to each other for each product ID. And at the end, we are grouping the result based on the product ID. You're of course familiar with the group by if you've been watching our previous videos of this playlist. So this subquery is adding all the revenues for each product and grouping the result by the product ID. I press enter, and here I have all products sorted based on their product ID, and in front of them we have the total revenue for each of those products. Of course, there are much more use cases, and we can go on and give you much more examples about subqueries, but I just wanted you to have an overall understanding over the concept of using subqueries, and I gave you some simple examples so you're more familiar with the syntax. I invite you to have a little bit practice and research on this and try to create some more sophisticated subquery commands so you're more familiar with this concept. In the next video, I'll be talking to you about MySQL triggers. That is a very handy skill to have. So practice on this one a little bit, and I'll meet you there soon. In MySQL, we have a concept called trigger. Triggers are the reserved command that we can set, so whenever a specific event has happened on our MySQL server, the trigger will be activated and the reserved command of it will be executed. This is the syntax when we want to create a trigger. We type create trigger, then we name it, and then we can specify the trigger to take effect before or after that specific event. And the specific event can be either insert, update, or delete on a specific table, and after that we can create our reserve command. Now let's go to the terminal and see how we can create one. I'm logged into the server and I'm using MySQL tutorials database, and the lessons table that we have has a column called last update. We want to create a trigger, so whenever we update one or more of these records, the trigger is activated and updates the last update field of that updated row or rows with the latest time stamp, latest date and time. The date and time will be calculated by the MySQL server itself, and the trigger will be executed after or before the update. Since we have not set any triggers on the server yet, if I type show triggers, we will get an empty set. But after creating that, the show triggers will show our trigger. First of all, we need to pay attention to this one, the default delimiter of MySQL. We are creating a trigger, right? And inside that trigger, we will write a command. That command will have a delimiter. When we are creating that command, at the middle of creation of the trigger, when we press enter to save the trigger, MySQL will consider it as a real command and will be trying to execute that command, and it will mess everything up and our trigger will be broken. So before creating a trigger, it's very important to change the delimiter, the default delimiter, from the semicolon, that is the default MySQL delimiter, to something else. And after creating the trigger, we can change the delimiter back to the default one. To change the delimiter, the only thing we need to do is typing delimiter and then the new delimiter. Now the delimiter is changed and we are safe to go ahead and create the trigger. To create a trigger, we type create trigger, then we name it. Let's name it update time. And then we want it to be triggered before update. So we type before update on. The table is lessons, and for each row that is updated, we need to create a command. The command begins here, and now it's time to set the command. Set new last update is the column that we want to work on, this one, and the last update will be equal to now, and this is where we type the delimiter for it. And this was the command, and here is the end of the delimiter. Now we type our new delimiter to end the process and save the trigger. And now we need to change the delimiter back to the default one. This was the whole process of creating the trigger. Now if I type show triggers again, we will see that we have created a trigger and it's executed before and the rest of the information. Now let's take a look again at the lessons table. We have nothing here. All of the records for the last update column are null, and let's update this one. Okay, I type update lessons, set title to something else, for example install and uninstall, where id equals 2. And I updated the second row. Right now select from table again, and as you see, the trigger is activated and has updated the last update column by the last date and time. So far we were talking about creating and showing triggers, and now let's see how we can delete them. Drop trigger if exists and the name of the trigger. As easy as this, you can delete a trigger that is already set on your MySQL table. Now let's get back to the terminal and drop the trigger that we just created. We named the trigger that we created update time. This will be the trigger that we want to drop. So drop trigger if exists and then the name. And query OK means the trigger is dropped. Now show triggers will show nothing anymore since we have dropped it. As you see, trigger is a very handy tool for creating automations and eases our operation. Commit in MySQL means saving changes and making them permanent so everybody else on the server can see it. Also, there's a variable called autocommit on MySQL, and it's turned on by default, and it autosaves every command and changes that we make on the server. In this video, we'll be talking about committing, the autocommit variable, and also how we can undo the changes that we make on the server by the rollback command. First, let's take a look at the variable. If I type show variables like autocommit, you see that the value is set to default, that is on. If I want to change a variable value on the MySQL server, no matter it's auto commit or any other type of variable, we can type set and then the name of the variable and then the value that we want it to have. Now, show variable again will show the value as off. Now that I have the auto commit off, if I make any changes on this server, it won't be permanent. It won't be saved permanently, so I can roll back. I can undo the changes with the rollback command. Let's take a look at the lessons table first to make it more clear. Select all from lessons will return the records from this table. These are the records that we already have, and since we have the auto commit off, if I do delete from lessons and select from it again, I will get an empty set, and these changes, the delete change that I have made is not saved yet because I have not typed the commit command. So if I type rollback and again I select, I will see that all the records are restored. But if I do the delete from lessons and then commit and then select, the changes will be permanent since I have written the commit command. And this is how we deal with the commit command, the auto commit variable, changing the variables on MySQL, and how we can undo and deal with the rollback. That's it for this video, but in the next one we will be talking more about variables and also user-defined variables. User-defined variables are the variables that we can create in MySQL server, and they are valid for a specific session that we create that variable on, and they are used to store and manipulate data and simplify our commands and our operations. In this video, we'll be talking about one of the very simple examples of user-defined variables, and here inside our sales table, we have some records, and also we have a column called revenue with some numbers as the revenue for each sales record. We want to create a user-defined variable and store all these revenues, and while the command that we create afterward is iterating through all these records, the variable that we have created will store all of these data and adds up the next one to the previous one. So at the end of the command, at the end of this iteration execution, we will have a number that is a total revenue that is stored in that specific variable. We can create the variables with the keyword set, and after that we need to type an @ sign. In different programming languages, variables are created with or without some special characters. For example, in Python we don't need to type anything. In PHP we type $. In JavaScript we have var or let or constant, or other type of programming languages have their own symbols and characters. But in MySQL, we create variables with @ sign. Then the name of the variable, whatever we want it to have, and also we can set an initial value. In this case, we are setting 0 at the initial value for this specific variable. So pressing enter will create this total sales variable for only this specific session. Now, if I type a select command, that stores the revenues and adds it up to the total revenue, and for each iteration it will return a record as a total revenue that is the sum of all the previous processed records. The result will be something like this. At the first record we have only 5,005 cents, and this is the first one since we have set the initial value to 0, and this is the only record that is added to this value. The next one will be this, that is the sum of these two records. The next one will add 3,000 more, and until the end of the record, and at the end the total sales will have a value that is the sum of all the records for the revenue column of the sales table. Of course, these type of variables can be used for too many more use cases. We can simplify complex queries, we can store data, we can do much more with them, but this was a very simple example to make you familiar with the concept. The only thing that we need to have in mind, as said, is that user-defined variables are limited to that specific session. When the session that we have created this variable on is terminated, the variable will be lost and will no longer take effect. In programming languages, we have a concept called functions. Functions are a set of commands that can take entry or entries, do their calculations on them, and return results. In MySQL, we have the same concept, but here we call them procedures. In this video, we'll be talking about stored procedures and how we can create, edit, call, and drop them. This is the basic syntax for creating a procedure. First, we type create procedure, then we name that procedure inside the parentheses. We'll go some functions, and after that, we can introduce a SQL statement, a command between begin and end keywords. Now let's go to the terminal and see how it works. Here in our sales table, we have a column called product ID. If you pay attention to the IDs, we have some products with some IDs that have more than one sales, and some of them have one sales only. We are about to create a stored procedure that takes the product ID and returns the number of sales that that specific product has made. If you watched the triggers video of this playlist, you remember that we changed that delimiter for some reason. Here is the same story. We are creating a procedure, and inside that procedure, we are defining a SQL statement. SQL statements are ended with semicolon. So when we're creating the procedure and we type the semicolon, that is the default MySQL delimiter, and if we press enter on the keyboard, MySQL will get confused and consider that delimiter as the end of the command and will try to execute that command. And since the procedure is not created and the command is incomplete, everything will mess up again and MySQL won't create our procedure and returns an error instead. So the first step is changing the default delimiter to something else. The way we change the delimiter, the default one, is typing delimiter and typing a new one for it. Now, if I type something like, for example, show tables and type the default delimiter, the command won't be executed until I type the new delimiter. This is how we can change the delimiter to something else. Now it's time to create the procedure. I type this command and it says create a procedure with this name, get order count, and know it as in product ID. Know the products as the product ID. Now we begin the SQL statement with wrapping between begin and end, and the statement is selecting all records from the cell count that related to this product ID when the product ID is given by the get order count while we call it. Now I press enter and I type the new delimiter and the procedure will be stored. Now it's safe to turn the delimiter back to the first one, to the default one. So I type delimiter and type the default one. Now everything gets back to default. Now that we have the procedure stored, we can call it just by simply type the call and then the name of procedure and give it the value inside the parentheses that we want to do the calculations on it. Let's see how it works. We had created this get orders count and now we want to use it. I type call and then get orders count and give it a product ID, for example the ID 1, and we see that it has 2 sales on the sales table. If we change it to something else, for example 3, that has only 1 record, we will get 1 as the total sales for the specific record. Also, there's a way to modify the procedure that we have created. We don't need to remove them and create new ones, and we can just edit them by typing alter procedure and then the procedure name, and the rest of command will be as we type here as the edited version. And if we wanted to delete a procedure exactly like what we did with the triggers, we can type drop procedure if exists and then the name of the procedure, and this is the procedure will be dropped. So if I go to terminal and type drop procedure and the name of it, this easy, I can drop the procedure I created. And this was the whole story about the stored procedures in MySQL that are called functions in other programming languages. You learned how you can create them, use them, edit them, and drop them. Of course, the SQL statement of procedures can be much more sophisticated, and also you can have as many procedures as you need on your server. Congratulations for making it this far in the tutorials. You already have learned a lot about MySQL Server Management, and in this part of the tutorial I'd like to provide you with a series of videos where I show you how you can connect with MySQL Server using multiple different programming languages. This video is dedicated to PHP, and I'll describe you how you can create a PHP script that connects to MySQL Server and retrieves data from it, and in the next videos we'll be working on other type of programming languages. I'm logged into the server and I'm using MySQL_tutorials database. Let's take a look at the tables that we have here by doing show tables. Here we have a table called students. Let's take a look at the records by selecting all records from the students table, and these are the records stored in this specific table. We are about to create a PHP script that connects to the server and retrieves all these records from the students table and shows them on the browser. To run PHP scripts on your local machine or on your server, you need to have PHP installed on that machine. I have already installed PHP on my machine, and it's running as my local server on the public directory. So I open a new window and navigate to that specific directory by change directory and then the name of it. And here I want to create a directory called MySQL, and inside it I will create my PHP script. I will upload this folder with all the programs after it's completed, after this series of programming languages, and I will give you the link so you can download it and see the codes and work on it if needed. Now I create a directory called MySQL and then navigate to it. And here I use Vim editor to create and edit the PHP script, but you can feel free to use any other text editor or IDE or Nano or whatever you want. I'm just trying to use as few tools as possible to make everything simple to understand. So I use Vim for editing this file. So I type vim index PHP that creates the file, and at the same time it opens the file to edit. Okay, now let's start with typing the script. First of all, we create the connection, and this connection needs some information like the server name, username, and password for the MySQL server. So let's create those variables first, and we start with the server name. I'm using the default one, that is localhost, and after that the username to that server, let's use the root username for now, and the password for it, I'm using a simple password for this tutorial, and then the database name, and we will be using this MySQL tutorials database. So now we have all the information to create the connection. We also create a connection and store it as a variable, as another variable. So I type create connection as the comment, and CONN is a very common name for the connection variable, and here we need to use the MySQL I_connect function of PHP to create the connection. This function gets the server name, the username, password, in database, all of the variables that we created beforehand. Now, first of all, we need to check the connection to make sure we can connect to it. We can do it using an if statement. So If the connection is not made, we can end the process by the die function and output some errors here. For example, connection failed, and then output the native PHP error but by MySQL connect error. Otherwise, it means that the connection has been successful, so we can output a success message. So far, we have attempted to connect and we have checked the connection. So let's save the file so far and test it once. The script is created inside the MySQL directory on the local host. So to check it, we need to type the browser name and then localhost and then the directory name. And as you see, we have been able to connect to the server successfully. Now let's extend the script a little bit more to retrieve the data from it. I go to the Vim editor again and let's delete this line. Now I create another variable called SQL that carries our SQL statement. Select all from students. And since we are using the MySQL tutorials, it's able to select from the tables inside this database. Also, we need another variable, let's call it result, that passes the SQL query, our SQL statement, using the query function of PHP to the connection this way. And here, using another if statement, we check if we are receiving any actual data. So we type if result numbers is greater than 0, meaning that if we are receiving any data from the table, while row equals result, and then fetch the associated data. Now we can retrieve the data here. We can, for example, echo, set a label for it. For example, the ID will be row, and inside the bracket, the exact name of the field. Here we have ID, so here we need to type the exact name of the column, and then we can concat it to other records. Another label, for example, first name will be equal to row, again the exact column name on the MySQL table, and again connect it to another one, last name, and also score will be row score. And if we want each record to go in a separated line, we can add a br tag of HTML to it, and at the end we need to close the connection, of course, for the security reason, by typing MySQL I_close and pass the connection variable to it. So this will be the whole script that connects to the MySQL server and retrieves data from the students table. Let's save it again and call it using the Firefox. And here, as you see, we have all those labels plus the records from the MySQL server. Last name was the label we created, and this one is the record, the actual record on our MySQL table. This is the way that you can create a PHP script that connects to MySQL and retrieves data from it. Of course, you can use other type of MySQL statements. We created just a simple select statement here, but whatever you have learned from the lessons on this playlist, you can use them as the MySQL statement here and execute them on your server using PHP with a script like this. PHP and MySQL are very meshed together, and in most cases, PHP scripts use MySQL as their database management server. In the next videos, we'll be working on other types of programming languages and connect those ones to MySQL server as well for you to see. In the previous video, we created a PHP script that connected to our server and retrieved data from the students table. In this video, we're doing the same, but this time with a Python script. We're about to create a Python script that connects to the MySQL server, uses MySQL_tutorials database, and retrieves all data from the students table. If you remember, I created the PHP script inside the MySQL directory. Now I have moved it to a directory called PHP to keep everything clean. Now I want to create another directory and call it Python, so we set the environment there and we go ahead with creating the script. As a first step, I first create a directory called Python, and then I navigate to it. And now I create a virtual environment using Python or Python 3-m and then venv, and then the name of the virtual environment. In this case, I just name it venv. And after creating the virtual environment, we need to activate it, of course. In Linux systems, we do it by the source command, venv, and then bin, and then activate. On other operating systems, it differs, but of course, if you're using Python, you're already familiar with that specific command. After activating the virtual environment, we need to install a library called MySQL connector. To do that, we type pip install MySQL-connector-python and wait for it to install. Based on the connection to the server and the server response, it may take a few moments, but after you have it installed, you're good to go to create your Python script. For now, we just have the virtual environment folder here, and now we want to create a file called main.py and write our Python script inside it. I'm using the Vim editor, but you're most welcome to use any type of IDE or editor that you want. I just want to keep everything simple so it's more understandable. I type vim main.py and press enter and start editing the script. First of all, we need to import the library that we have installed by typing import mysql.connector. And now that we have imported this library, we can create a variable called MySQL connector that uses the connect method, and this method takes some information like host, and then this must be comma, of course, and then user, and then password, and at the end, the database. Now let's fill this information with the actual data. Localhost will be our host name, since I'm using the default host name on this server, and I want to use the root user that has a simple password like this, and the database that I want to work on is MySQL_tutorials, as you see it here. So this MyDB will carry the connection using the data that I've have given it. So the next one is creating a cursor using another variable. Let's call it my cursor, and then my db and cursor. Now it's time to create a SQL statement using this cursor. So I type my cursor dot execute and then the SQL statement. So it will be select all from the students. And then we need another variable to store the results from this connection to it. So I type my result equals my cursor dot fetch all, that retrieves all data. If it's multiple rows, it doesn't matter. So after that, we will loop through all the data received from the connection and show them using a for loop. And so x will be representing a row. Each row will be representing an x from our my result. This way. So afterward we can print them out, and that will be the whole Python script that we need. Let's save this and call it using Python 3 and then main py. I'm using Python 3 on this machine, and after executing the command, after calling the main py, as you see, all the data from the MySQL table are retrieved. And this is the way that we connect to MySQL servers using Python scripts. On the previous videos of this last series of programming languages from this playlist, we created two scripts, one PHP and one Python, that were able to connect to our MySQL server and retrieve data from it. Now, inside the MySQL directory, I have two other directories, one called PHP and one Python, that carry the relevant scripts and programs. Now I'm about to create a bash script in this video that connects to the MySQL server and retrieves data, exactly the same as PHP and Python, but this time in bash script. So I navigate inside MySQL directory and create another directory called bash, and then navigate to the bash. And here I create a file using the Vim editor called bash.sh. sh is the extension for the bash script, of course. Now I'm good to go ahead and create my bash script. I start editing it by typing the wrapper, so it tells the system that this is a bash script. I can do it this way, and after that I need some information to create the connection based on. So the first variable that I want to create is host, and the other one will be port. I can specify a port if I've changed it, of course, and then the user, and then password, the database, and at the end we need another variable called query that carries our SQL statement. Now let's fill these variables with the actual data. The host will be localhost, the port will be the default one, 3306. Since we have not changed it, I want to use the root user that has this simple password, and the database that we want to connect to is MySQL tutorials. Now it's time to create the SQL statement that will be select all from students. And this is the whole information to create the connection. Now I type MySQL and dash lowercase h, and then I give it the host, and then dash uppercase P to specify the port. After that, dash lowercase u. This is case sensitive, please pay attention. Uppercase and lowercase makes difference here. So after u, we specify the user, And after that, we type P and stick to it. We need to specify the password, then dash uppercase D for database, and at the end, for the executable command, we type dash lowercase e and give it the query. These are the information, the variables, and the actual command itself. Now I save this command, and if I do an ls here, we have the bash script, but it's not executable. It's just a simple file. Since you see the style, it's very simple. And if I want to make it executable on Linux systems, we can do chmod and +x and then the name of the script. I do an ls here, and this time we see it in green color and bold font. It means that this is executable now. To execute this script, we need to type // and then the name of the file, that is this one. And so we have been able to retrieve all data using a bash script from MySQL tutorials database of our server. And this is how we can create a bash script to connect to MySQL server. And of course, you can tweak this SQL statement and make it customized for your needs. In the last few videos, we created some scripts using PHP, Python, and Bash scripts that could connect to our MySQL server and retrieve data from it. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a C++ program that does the same, connects to MySQL server, uses these MySQL_tutorials database, and select all data from the students table. And these are the records that we are expecting to be retrieving with this program. If you remember, we had a server that wasn't public, and I created a directory called MySQL, and here we have all those scripts stored: Python, PHP, Bash script. Also, I have created a directory called C++, and I want to create my program inside this directory. I navigate to it, and here I want to create a file using Vim editor. You can use any type of editor or IDE, it's up to you, but to keep everything simple, I use Vim and type vim mysql.cpp. MySQL is the name that I chose. You can choose whatever you want, and .cpp is the extension for C++ programs. After pressing enter and then I on the keyboard, I'm ready to go and create my program. First of all, we need to import some libraries, and we do it by typing include and then inside the bracket the name of the driver. MySQL driver is one of them, .h. These must be brackets. And another library will be MySQL_connection.h. Another one will be CPPCONN, standing for C++ connection, and then result set to work with the results. Another one will be again CPPCONN/statement.h, and the last one will be IO stream. These are the libraries that we need to use, we need to import while connecting to MySQL. Now let's create the main function by typing int main void and here we create a pointer for MySQL driver this way, MySQL_driver, and will be driver. Then a pointer for connection. Let's call it CON. And then we need to do a try catch. And after all, we do a return 0. And now it's time to fill the try part. First of all, let's create an instance for the driver. I type driver equals SQL double colon MySQL double colon and get underscore driver underscore instance. And then we are good to go to establish the connection using the driver with driver connect, and inside the parentheses we need to pass the information about the server. The server will be using the TCP protocol, and the address to localhost is of course 127.0.0.1, and then the port to the MySQL server. That's the default port that I'm using, and it's 3306. Then the username, I'm using root, and the password for root is this. So this will establish the connection. Now it's time to set the default schema or the database that we want to use. We do it this way. Connection set state schema, and here we type the name of the tutorials, the name of the database, this one that we want to use. Here we need a statement object to connect to to execute actually SQL queries on the server. So I type SQL statement and then name it, and it equals connection create statement. Now we have everything set, and it's time to execute our query on the server. So I type SQL result set, and I name it res, and it equals to statement execute query. Let me check the typo if I have one. Execute query. Yeah, result set. That's correct. Now, inside the parentheses, we can type our SQL statement. Select star from students. Just a statement that we use on the MySQL terminal. Now that we have executed the command on the server, it will return multiple rows, and we need to create a while loop to loop through all these records and return them back to us for each data retrieval. So I type while result is returning we output the information retrieved from the server. Cout, so cout will output whatever we write here. ID is a label that we create, and get int because we are about to get the ID, and the data type for ID is int. Here the name that we type here must be the exact name on the MySQL server so it can find it. Let's output one more record from each row. Again, we add this label to the previous string, and then result, this time get string, because we want to get the first name, and first name data type is a string. And after that, we're good to go to end the line. Now it's time to clean up the free resources by doing delete results, delete statement, and also delete the connection, because we already have retrieved the information and we no longer need them. But I made a mistake here. It must be after the while loop. Okay, and this part will be executed if the SQL is returning errors, SQL exception, and E. So if the connection is not made or any error has happened, we can handle them this way. std CERR, and here we can type something to show, for example, error, SQL error, and then we output the actual error. std and done. And this is the whole script that we write as our C++ code to connect to the MySQL server and retrieve data from the students table of MySQL_tutorials database. Let's remove these lines. So you can have all the code at once if you want to take a screenshot or pause the video. And now I save the file. Here I have the mysql.cpp file, so it's time to compile it and turn it to an executable program. So I use G++ and output, name the output MySQL, and then I give the file path to it, and then -l mysql cpp conn, and this must compile a program. Now we have a program that we can use. If I do an ls, you see the MySQL program compiled here. The way that I can call it is just like bash script, and when I call it and press enter, as expected, we have all the data retrieved from the students table. This is the way that you can create a C++ program and compile it to connect to your MySQL server and execute commands on it. We used just a simple select command to show you how it goes, but of course you can tweak this tutorial and use complicated and sophisticated commands and do whatever you want with this script. In the last few videos, we created some scripts using multiple programming languages that could connect to our MySQL server and retrieve data from it. We used PHP, Python, Bash script, and C++ to do that. And in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a script using the Perl language that connects to MySQL server and retrieves data. The instance that we want to work on is our MySQL tutorials database and students table that have this records inside it. We will create a Perl script that connects to this server and retrieves this data and outputs them. The script that we want to create is using a module, a Perl module called dbd-mysql. If you have not installed this module on your computer, you need to install it, and you can do it by opening your terminal and typing cpan and then dbd uppercase and double colon mysql. This way you can install the module. Also, there's another way to install this module, and it's using the prepackaged module, and it's installed by sudo apt install lib dbd-mysql-perl. Both ways can install this module or the prepackaged module on your server, and you will be good to go to create your Perl script. Now let's get started with creating the script. I already have a directory called MySQL inside my local machine, inside my local host, and if you've been watching the previous videos about the scripts, you will know about it. So I want to navigate to it. It was in my public folder, and it was called MySQL. Here, if I do an ls, you will see that we have those 4 scripts and a directory for each of them. Now let's create a new directory called Perl and navigate to it and create a file called mysql.pl. I'm using the Vim editor. You can use any type of text editor or IDE, and I start editing it. First of all, we need to specify the type of the script by typing the Perl wrapper here, and now we're good to go and import some libraries, strict warnings, and also DBI. And now we need to create some variables to store the data that we need to connect to the server and execute the commands. The first variable, let's call it DSN, and it will be DBI MySQL as the name of the module, and database. The name of the database that we want to use is MySQL_tutorials, and then the host, that is localhost, and the port is the default port for MySQL, that is 3306. The other variable that we need is the username. I want to use root, and the password for this username is this. Now let's create another variable that stores the database connection string for us and call it dbh, that is equal to dbi, and then connect uses the connect function, and the connect will pass the DSN, username, and the password variables that we created. And if the connection is not successful, we can terminate the script by the die function, and here we can output the error, for example, could not connect to database. And here the actual error will be shown, error str. Now let's prepare the query by creating a variable called statement, and it equals to dbh, that use the prepare method, and inside the parentheses we can type our SQL statement, and it's select all from the students. And after creating the statement, we can execute the command using it, execute, and if there's any error executing the command, we can end the process and then handle the error this way, error executing query, and then again dbi error str to show the actual error. Now it's time to loop through the data retrieved from the database using a while loop, and we can type my row equals the statement as long as it fetches the rows, and they have data. While this is true, we can print out the result ID as a label, and then to output a record from a column, we need to type row, and inside the brackets we need to specify the exact name of the column on the MySQL server. Then we can type more labels and output more records the same way, and this time first name, and at the end to break the line to go to the next one to show a new record, we can type \n. And after all these, we need to close the connection for security reasons, and it's done by dbh disconnect. And this is the whole script that we need to connect to MySQL server and retrieve data from it. You can use any type of SQL statement here, and of course there's no limitations. So now let's save the file, and here if I do an ls, I have a simple file here, and just like bash script, we need to make this file executable so we can use it. I type chmod and +x and then the name of the file, and here another ls will show that this file is executable now. And to execute it, I can type // and then the name of the file, and as you see, the data is retrieved as expected. And this was the whole process of creating a Perl script to connect to MySQL server and execute commands on it. There are multiple ways to take backups from our MySQL information. In this video, I'll be talking about one of those methods, that is using CSV files. I'll be taking a backup from this students table and store the information of it inside a CSV file. Then I will delete the information on the server, and then we'll try to restore the information from that CSV file for you to see. First of all, open the parentheses and type select, and type some labels to go above the CSV file. I just mentioned the exact column name here to make it more clear. ID, first name, last name, and score. Then I do a union, and then select ID, first name, last name, score, and this time I'm pointing to the exact name of the tables from the students, and close the parentheses. Now I type into out file, and let's call it backup.csv, then fields terminated by comma and closed by double quote, and lines terminated by \n, and this is the whole command. Now I have taken the backup and have stored it in a file called backup.csv that is saved on the directory of this database on my local machine. So let's take a look at it. I open a new terminal window and navigate to take a look at the folder that is supposed to be created at sudo ls var lib mysql as the default directory of MySQL installation on Linux systems, and then MySQL_tutorials folder, since MySQL creates a new directory for each database. And here we have the backup.csv created. Now let's take a look at it by doing cat and then backup.csv, and these are the data that has been taken from the server, and this is the label. These are the labels here. Whatever we type here will be going at the top of the CSV file. Okay, now let's remove these information from the table by doing delete from the students, and it will remove all data. If I do select all from the students, I won't see anything anymore, an empty set, since we have removed the data. And now let's restore the information from this CSV file into the table, so we again have all these records on the table on the MySQL server. First of all, I'd like to set the auto increment to 1 for this table again, so I do an alter table, the students, and then auto increment to 1. Now I type load data in file, then the name of file, backup.csv, and then into table, the students, the name of the table, and then fields terminated by comma and closed by double quote, lines terminated by \n, standing for line break, and ignore one rows or lines. And this will import the data from our CSV file. Now if I do select all from the students again, we'll see that the data is back. And this is how we can use the CSV format to take backups and restore backups in MySQL. During this course, you learned a lot about database management system, and at this stage you know almost whatever you need to get started and handle the job, and I'm really proud of you about that. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about security and specifically backup and the tools and strategies that you need to know about. As you know, data and information is the main part of any application and website, and it's critical to have a good backup strategy behind your schedule so you can keep everything safe. If the data is gone, the whole application and environment is useless. So in this video, we'll be talking about some tools and logics that you can use to keep this data safe and have regular backups of your database. The first option that I want to talk to you about is the one that you are already seeing on the screen. It's called MySQL dump, and it's a command line tool that you can execute on your terminal. You can type MySQL dump and then username and password and then name the backup file, and by executing the command, MySQL server will take the backup for you. It's very used by database managers to take the backups manually, and it's very easy to use as well. You don't even need to be logged into the server as you're giving the username and password. Another option is taking physical backups. As you saw in the previous videos, we have MySQL directory as the main directory of our MySQL installation. On Linux system, it's inside var/lib/MySQL, and inside this MySQL directory, you will have subdirectories that represent the databases. If you have, for example, 10 databases created on the server, you will have 10 subdirectories under this MySQL directory that represent the databases, and inside those subdirectories you will have files that represent the tables and also the settings of that database. So if you copy the main MySQL directory and save it somewhere, it means that you have already all the data on your MySQL server. So this is the way that you can easily copy and paste and create a backup of the whole MySQL server. A good idea that eases our process a lot is using the automation tools of operating systems to create scheduled backups. And it's done by, for example, using cron jobs on Linux and Unix systems and the task scheduler on Windows machines. We can use these automation tools to create scheduled backups, and the schedule will take backups for us between the periods that we mention for it. We can do it minutely, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, or in whatever period that we're interested in. So this is a very handy option to pass the task to machines and ease our projects. They say do good to see good. It's not accurate always, but in case of machines and 0 and 1, it mostly works. So let's talk about the best practices that you need to have in mind for your backup strategy. Let's say that you have set the cron job backup schedule for your machine. You have stored all the previous backups. You have everything in place and set, but you're not monitoring anything. And during this, if some problem happens with some services, with some applications, and you're not aware of it, the same problem will happen. The backup will be broken, the data will be lost. So it's very important to have a regular monitoring over the procedures and over the processes that you design for your backup logic. Also, we all have heard that no application is 100% secured. And the bad news is that's true. So if we have the backups, not only the database backups, but every type of important files that we don't want anybody else to have access to, if we keep them somewhere offline, for example, on a hard drive, on a flash disk that is not connected to any machine or internet, it's a good idea to select that tool to keep our data safe. This way, we ensure that nobody else has access to it. One of the common reasons that people face problem losing data and not having backups is laziness. I want you to not be from those people and take backups and take this subject as serious as possible. When you're under attack or you've already lost some data, it's not time to think about it anymore. When you have time, when you are working, when everything's fine, take your backups and also backups of those backups, and do this backups after 10 other versions of the backups that you have taken. So I cannot emphasize it enough. Just I want you to take it as serious as you can. The other important subject to have in mind is having a monitoring system on over your backup strategy, backup process. If you can write automated tests, if you can set alerts for the backup process, so when something goes wrong or backup is failed, you will be alerted and you can proceed with resolving the problem. It's very important to have such monitoring system over your schedules. Another good idea is taking incremental backups. Let's say that you have an application that has daily updates. Every day, new information is stored in the database. If you're taking incremental backups, you're taking backups of the new information that are inserted only. So since the file size is smaller, the backup process will be done faster, and also you will need much less storage to store the backup files. And these were the tools, the logics, and the concepts behind the backup and the strategies for that I wanted to talk to you about in this lecture. Well, this is the end of the tutorial. I hope you liked it and found it useful. We release videos on design, development, open source technologies, Linux, security, and subjects like this. So check out our other videos on the channel and stay tuned for more if you're interested. With all that being said, thank you all for watching, and until the next one, I bid you farewell.